Something in you already knows. This isn't random. You tell yourself you were just scrolling, just passing time, just numbing the static of another ordinary night. But that's the lie your nervous system tells to keep you inside familiar walls. The truth is simpler and more precise. Your consciousness crossed a line you didn't see, and now reality is responding with a signal that has been waiting for this exact threshold. You feel it, don't you? That subtle pressure behind your eyes, that strange alertness in your chest. Tonight is not like other nights. You can sense it in the way silence feels louder. There is a moment in every timeline where the observer can no longer pretend to be asleep. A moment when your thoughts, your choices, your contradictions, your unspoken prayers accumulate into a measurable field, a pattern in the quantum field so coherent, so precise that it triggers what physicists would call a phase transition and mystics would call an initiation. You just crossed it. Not because you're good enough or finally healed, not because some distant authority decided to bless you, but because your internal data, your fears, your desires, your questions, your grief reached a statistical tipping point. Enough self-observation, enough nights of asking silently, is this really all there is? Enough micro-decisions where you chose awareness over anesthesia, honesty over performance, truth over comfort. Those little moments added up. They formed a pattern. Patterns become thresholds, and thresholds do not negotiate. So the quantum field did what it always does when a human crosses a hidden line. It arranged a convergence. One more video in an infinite scroll, except this one is calibrated to the exact frequency of your current confusion. Every sentence you're hearing now is riding on top of an invisible instruction to your nervous system: wake up differently. Not wake up and burn everything. Not wake up and reject the world. Wake up and see what's actually happening. Right now, as you listen, your brain is running models. It's testing this message against your history, your old beliefs, your disappointments, your spiritual experiments that didn't deliver what they promised. Part of you wants to lean in. Another part wants to dismiss this as aesthetic language, clever editing. Another voice promising transformation. Observe that conflict. Don't fix it. Just see it. Because this is the first confirmation you have. Become self-aware enough to watch your own resistance in real time. That's not normal for the version of you who lived previous years on autopilot. That's not how you used to respond. The fact that you can notice yourself trying to shut this down means you've already stepped beyond the old script. You're not at the beginning of your awakening. You're at the threshold after which pretending becomes impossible. Tonight isn't about adding more beliefs. It's about revealing the architecture you've been living inside without consent. And now that you've crossed this hidden quantum line, that architecture can finally be exposed. You've lived inside that architecture for so long you've mistaken it for you. You call it personality, trauma, astrology. This is just how I am. But beneath those labels, something colder and more precise has been running your life in a predictive system built from every moment your nervous system decided what reality must be to keep you alive. It doesn't care about truth. It cares about continuity. From a psychological lens, you can call it your survival code. From a quantum lens, you can call it your observer pattern, the way you habitually look at the world. The meanings you assign to events. The expectations you carry into every room before anything happens. This is the loop that quietly instructs the quantum field how to collapse into your next experience. You think reality is happening to you. In practice, it's executing your old script. Think about the way you brace when you open a message from someone who matters to you. The micro flinch in your chest, the voice that whispers, "What did I do wrong?" before you even read the words. That isn't logic. That's a prediction engine shaped by old pain and repeated outcomes. And because you're expecting threat, you scan for it. You highlight it. You collapse around it. You respond from it. The field listens. Your body is the antenna. Your attention is the tuning dial. You don't just observe reality, you sample it. Out of billions of possible interpretations, you choose the one that feels consistent with your past. That selection stabilizes a timeline. Then you repeat it tomorrow, and the next day, and the next. Eventually, you call it fate. The hidden quantum threshold you cross tonight is not mystical fireworks. It's the moment your self-awareness became strong enough to see that this architecture is optional. Not easy to dismantle, but not inevitable. You can feel the split inside you now, the one who's still fused with the script and the one who's watching the script run. This second awareness is the real event. Because once a system can observe itself, it can begin to rewrite itself. In physics, when a system reaches a critical point, a tiny change can trigger a phase transition, water becoming vapor metal, becoming magnetized matter, rearranging its order. From the outside it looks sudden, but from the inside it's the result of countless invisible shifts adding up until the old configuration can't hold. That's your consciousness tonight. Old configuration nearing collapse. New configuration seeking entry. You've felt the pressure building, the dissatisfaction with shallow answers, the exhaustion of playing roles that don't fit, the quiet nausea at relationships that demand you shrink to keep the peace. You've noticed how your body reacts when you betray yourself just to keep things normal. Your heart drops. Your throat tightens. Your energy drains. Those are not random mood swings, they are measurement devices. Your body has been collecting data on your life like a laboratory in the background. Every time you say yes when you mean no, a signal gets logged. Every time you abandon your inner knowing to avoid conflict, another data point is added. Over years, that dataset becomes overwhelming. At a certain scale, the system must respond, so it does, by pushing you to a quantum threshold. That's why things have felt so strange recently. Why certain patterns that used to be merely painful have become intolerable. Why the thought of living the same year again makes something in you recoil. You're not being dramatic. You're registering that the current configuration of your consciousness is no longer compatible with the next version of your life. You're standing at the brink between two realities. The one where you continue to obey the old predictive architecture, and the one where you begin to see it, question it, and gently refuse it. But here's the paradox: the architecture will not simply dissolve because you decide to wake up. It will fight for its life. It will use fear, logic, memory, and even spirituality to argue that nothing can really change, that you're asking for too much, that people like you don't cross thresholds like this. You're hearing those voices already. They sound like you. They are not you. They are the echoes of a reality you're about to outgrow. The part of you that is afraid right now is not the enemy. It's the oldest guardian you have. It was built in rooms you barely remember. It learned from faces that didn't know how to love you clearly. It studied the way doors closed, the way voices sharpened, the way safety disappeared without warning. Then it made a vow on your behalf: never again. I will protect you from this. That vow became code. That code became your lens. That lens became your reality. So when you reach a quantum threshold like tonight, that guardian panics. Because from its perspective, anything unknown is a potential repeat of the worst moments you've survived. It doesn't see expansion, it sees threat. It doesn't see awakening, it sees destabilization. Its only job is to keep you within the statistical comfort zone of what you've already endured. Familiar pain is safer, it thinks, than unfamiliar freedom. This is why you sabotage opportunities. Why you pull back when love gets too real. Why you feel a strange vertigo when a door opens that doesn't match your narrative of struggle. Your internal guardian is trying to drag you back below the threshold into the region of reality it knows how to predict. But there's something different about you tonight. You are not just feeling the fear, you are observing it. Observe the way your body tightens when you imagine actually changing your life. Notice how your mind rushes to invent worst-case scenarios. You'll be abandoned, you'll fail, you'll be humiliated, you'll regret everything. That eruption of images is not prophecy. It's probability projected by a system trained on the past. You're not required to obey it anymore. This is where quantum physics stops being metaphor and starts becoming practice. At the subatomic level, particles don't move in straight linear inevitabilities. They exist in clouds of possibility, a range of outcomes that only become specific when observed. The observer doesn't force reality, but the act of measuring selects from the available options. Your consciousness does something similar every day. When your nervous system is fused with fear, your observation is narrow. You scan for threat. You highlight rejection. You mentally rehearse betrayal. In that state, your brain cannot even perceive certain possibilities. They're technically present in the field, but they don't show up in your awareness because your measurement device is calibrated to danger. Tonight, the calibration is shifting. Not to naive positivity, not to delusion, but to something more precise: coherence. Coherence is what happens when your mind, body, and intention start moving in the same direction instead of fighting each other. When your thoughts stop arguing with your intuition. When your breathing stops contradicting your words. When your choices stop betraying your deepest knowing. You've had brief flashes of this before. Moments when you said something true even though your voice shook. Moments when you walked away from a dynamic that fed on your self-doubt. Moments when you created something that felt like it arrived through you, not from you. Those moments weren't random. They were early signals of the threshold you crossed tonight. Each time you acted from coherence instead of fear, the quantum field logged that. Your internal architecture trembled just a little. The script glitched. The old guardian took notes. They survived that. The world didn't end when they were honest. Maybe this is also safe. Your system updated by a fraction of a degree. Enough micro-updates and a catalytic night arrives. You don't need to make this sacred by adding candles or rituals, though you can. It's already sacred because your nervous system, your psychology, and the larger field have synchronized around one silent realization. If you keep repeating the old script, something essential in you will die slowly while your body keeps walking. You feel that as a kind of spiritual claustrophobia. The sense that you're outgrowing your own life but don't know how to step into the new one without destroying everything. That tension is not a mistake. It's the pressure that cracks the shell. So here is the first instruction at this new level of consciousness. Do not make any sudden external moves tonight. Don't quit everything. Don't confess everything. Don't burn your bridges in a blaze of awakening. The threshold you crossed is internal first. This is about how you observe, not yet about what you change. Your task now is quieter and far more difficult. You're going to watch your life like a scientist and a mystic sharing the same body. You're going to notice where your guardian speaks for you without consent. You're going to feel how your muscles harden when you prepare to betray yourself. You're going to track the exact microsecond where you collapse your possibility cloud into the same old outcome because it feels safer. You're not doing this to judge yourself, you're doing this to gather data. Because the next phase of this threshold is not about believing new ideas. It's about exposing with ruthless clarity the hidden agreements that have been steering your reality in the dark. You've made agreements with reality you don't remember signing. They live in sentences you repeat under your breath and call truth. I'm always the one who cares more. People leave when they see the real me. Nothing good lasts. I have to earn my place. You think you're describing the world, you're actually programming it. An agreement is not just a thought. It's a contract between your nervous system and the quantum field. It says, This is what I expect, this is what I will prepare for, this is what I will unconsciously cooperate with. Once that contract is live, you start arranging yourself around it. You choose partners that confirm it. You ignore opportunities that contradict it. You hear tone where there is none, threat where there is curiosity, rejection where there is silence. The field doesn't need to punish you. You're already doing the job for it. This is the hidden cruelty of your architecture. It makes you participate in your own limitations like a loyal employee following outdated rules. You don't notice because the system rewards you with something subtle every time you obey the relief of being right. Being right feels safer than being free. Your mind would rather suffer in familiar ways than endure the vertigo of new possibilities, because new possibilities mean one terrifying thing: uncertainty. And to your ancient guardian, uncertainty looks like standing unarmored in the middle of a battlefield. So it maintains the contracts. You might hear them right now as you think about changing your life. If I set a boundary, they'll leave. If I slow down, I'll fall behind and never recover. If I tell the truth, I'll be punished. If I trust this pull towards something higher, I'll be laughed at. These are not poetic lines. They are executable code. And tonight, as you cross this quantum threshold, your work is not to argue with them intellectually. It's to see them with a level of clarity so sharp they can no longer operate in the dark. Think of yourself as a scientist watching a particle track appear on a detection screen. Before the measurement, the particle is a cloud of probabilities. Afterward, you can see its trail, the exact path it took. Your hidden agreements have left tracks all over your life. Similar endings with different people, recurring financial ceilings, the same emotional roles in every group. The way joy always seems to go wrong at the same point. You're going to start tracing those tracks backward. Not to blame yourself, to locate the original contract. Imagine pausing at the moment you usually collapse. The message comes in and your chest tightens. The invitation appears and you instinctively minimize yourself. The compliment lands and you immediately deflect it with a joke. In that microsecond before you respond, something happens inside you, a prediction fires. Your body flashes an image or a memory or a sensation. Last time you opened up, it hurt. Last time you trusted, they turned away. Last time you hoped, it broke you. There. That's the contract speaking. Your new task at this threshold is to name it in real time. I notice that I'm expecting abandonment. I notice that I'm assuming humiliation. I notice that I'm predicting failure before anything has happened. This seems too simple to matter. It is not. When you name a contract as a prediction rather than a prophecy, you introduce a crack in its authority. You move from inside the agreement to witnessing the agreement. In quantum terms, you've changed frames of reference. You're no longer just the particle flying along the track. You're also the detector watching it. And once you can see the track, you can ask a question that your old self never thought to ask. What else is statistically possible here that I am refusing to measure? Maybe not a fairy tale outcome. Maybe not instant perfection, but something different, slightly kinder, slightly more aligned, slightly less self-betraying. You don't need to leap to the highest timeline. You just need to stop auto-selecting the worst one. So here is the second instruction of this initiation. For the next season of your life, you are not allowed to call your fear intuition without interrogating it first. You're going to feel the surge of no in your body, the contraction, the dread, the urge to run. Before you obey it, you will pause 3 slow breaths in and out, and you will ask it a simple question. Are you protecting me from real danger or from an outcome that only exists in my memory? That pause is small in clock time, but in the quantum field it's massive, because in that pause the old contract doesn't get to collapse the wave function automatically. A new observer enters the lab, the you who crossed the threshold tonight. the you who is willing to be slightly more uncomfortable in exchange for being significantly more alive. You're not erasing your past, you're reassigning it, from dictator to data, and when your past becomes data, your future stops being a prison. There's a reason this threshold feels like both relief and grief at the same time. Something in you is finally exhaling because your inner knowing is being confirmed. You are not imagining the distortion, the misalignment, the sense that your life didn't quite fit your actual size. But something else in you is quietly dying, the identity that only knew how to exist inside that distortion. You're not just changing beliefs, you're outgrowing a version of yourself that thought it was the whole story. That version was built with careful logic. It knew where you were allowed to speak and where you had to shrink. It kept a meticulous inventory of what made you lovable and what made you too much. It mapped out the emotional weather patterns of every important relationship and decided often as a child, this is who I must be to survive this climate. Then it fused with the map. It forgot that it was drawn. It thought it was the terrain. So when you start questioning contracts, that identity feels attacked, not because it's evil, but because its entire existence has been organized around one core job: protect you from annihilation by fitting the pattern. If the pattern dissolves, it doesn't know what you are. This is why awakening feels like loss. You're not just losing illusions about other people. You're losing illusions about yourself. The martyr, the caretaker, the invisible one, the hero, the misunderstood genius, the broken one, the one who always almost makes it but never quite arrives. These archetypes have wrapped themselves around your nervous system like armor plates. Heavy, restrictive, but familiar. Taking them off feels like standing naked in cosmic weather. Here's the part your old self doesn't understand. Your consciousness cannot cross a quantum threshold without your body also being invited. This isn't purely conceptual, it's physiological. Your nervous system is the hardware through which your new awareness has to run. If it can't handle the voltage, you'll default back to old patterns just to discharge the excess energy. So the field will not only rearrange your outer life, it will start editing your inner tempo. You may notice strange things in this season. Conversations that used to excite you now drain you in minutes. Habits that once numbed you suddenly feel intolerable, like sand in your mouth. Spaces where you used to disappear now feel too tight to enter without suffocating. This is not you becoming picky. It's your system recalibrating to a new baseline of coherence. Imagine your consciousness as a tuning fork. For years, it has been forced to vibrate according to the dominant frequency around it. Family systems, cultural narratives, unspoken rules. You learn to dampen your natural resonance to avoid dissonance with the room. That dampening looked like self-doubt, over-explaining, chronic apologizing, constant monitoring of others' reactions. Crossing this threshold is the moment the tuning fork starts to ring at its own natural frequency again. At first, that sound is subtle. You hear it as a quiet no rising in your chest in situations where you used to automatically say yes. You feel it as a strange, irrational peace when you consider choices that make no sense on paper, but feel clean in your body. You sense it as an almost physical pull toward environments, people, and practices that sharpen your clarity instead of dulling it. Your old identity will interpret this as danger. It will whisper, "You're changing too fast. You'll end up alone." People will say you've lost yourself. But here is the truth hidden underneath that fear: you are not losing yourself. You are losing the version of you that was constructed to be acceptable to people who never met your actual soul. That loss will hurt. Let it. Grief is not proof you're going the wrong way. Grief is what happens when the nervous system releases structures that were built for survival in a reality you are no longer choosing. Tears, fatigue, disorientation, the sensation of being between lives while still paying the same bills, these are normal symptoms of crossing a hidden quantum threshold. You're in a liminal band of the timeline now. In this band, you are too awake to fully re-enter your old story, but not yet stabilized in the new one. Physics has a word for this sort of region: metastable, a state that could tip in more than one direction depending on subtle influences. This is why your attention matters more than ever here. You are exquisitely sensitive to what you repeatedly focus on. Feed only what you want to keep. When you replay old humiliations, you strengthen the gravitational field of the past. When you mentally rehearse future disasters, you lend your creative power to timelines you don't actually want to live. When you indulge in cynical narratives about how people are, you give your guardian fresh evidence to keep the contracts alive. But when you place your awareness on small moments of coherence, the honest conversation, the boundary held without drama, the hour you spent doing what makes you quietly come alive, you are not just being positive. You are amplifying a new signal in the field. Signal becomes pattern. Pattern becomes path. Path becomes life. You are not asked to pretend it's easy. You are asked to become ruthlessly faithful to the version of you that is emerging even before there is external proof that it will work. You keep asking, often silently, how to trust a reality you haven't lived yet. You've been trained to worship evidence, to only relax when you can point to something concrete and say, "See, it's real, I'm safe, it's working." But at this threshold, evidence can't go first. If it did, you'd stay in the same loop forever, confirming only what your past has already seen. The observer doesn't wait for the pattern. The observer generates the pattern. In the language of physics, your life up to now has been mostly classical, predictable, linear repeating. You wake, you run the same emotional scripts, you predict the same reactions, you brace for the same disappointments. Even when circumstances change, the inner geometry stays the same. This is the classical limit of your consciousness, where the quantum weirdness of possibility has been averaged out by years of repetition. But the threshold you cross tonight pulls you back into the quantum. In this region, your reactions are not fully decided yet. The outcome of your next conversation is not locked. The way you interpret your next setback is not predetermined. You are in a zone of superposition. Multiple emotional futures coexist, and which one solidifies depends on how you show up to observe yourself in the moment. This is not about forcing your feelings into positivity. It's about expanding what you can notice. You're used to scanning for threat and betrayal. Now you're going to start scanning for coherence and alignment with equal intensity. Not to deny pain, but to stop worshiping it as the only reliable signal. Imagine walking into a familiar room tomorrow, a workplace, a family space, a digital interaction you dread. Normally, your body goes on autopilot, shoulders tense, voice tightens, thoughts spiral into the usual self-critique. This time you pause internally and run a different experiment. You ask, what would I notice in this room if I were not assuming I'm already the problem? That question is a quantum nudge. Without changing anything externally, you just altered the measurement apparatus. Instead of aiming your awareness solely at evidence of your unworthiness, you open a second channel, evidence of neutrality, support, or simple indifference that your old architecture would have ignored. The room doesn't instantly turn sacred, but your sampling of it changes. And when your sampling changes, your behavior shifts by degrees. You stand a little straighter. You answer a little more honestly. You don't rush to fill silence with apology. To an outside observer, these are micro-adjustments. To the quantum field, they are new boundary conditions. The equations that describe your interactions now include an extra parameter: your willingness to exist as you are without preemptive self-erasure. Small parameters, big consequences. Your old identity will argue that this is naive. It will say reality is harsh, people are selfish, systems don't care about you. There is truth in that, but only partial truth. The deeper, more dangerous truth at this threshold is that you have been collaborating with that harshness by perpetually shrinking yourself to fit it, making it easier for systems to use you and harder for resonance to find you. You're not here to pretend the world is kind. You're here to stop scripting your own disappearance. This is where prophecy enters not as prediction, but as alignment with trajectories already visible from a higher vantage point. There is a version of you that your nervous system has glimpsed in dreams, in daydreams you quickly dismiss in those strange moments when you catch your reflection and feel for a split second like you're looking at someone not yet fully born. That version is not fantasy. It's a standing wave in the field. A pattern that already exists as information waiting for enough coherence in your current state to lock in and become your lived reality. You could call it your higher self, your future self, your core template. The name doesn't matter. What matters is that once you cross a threshold like tonight, you stop relating to that version as an impossible ideal and start treating it like a reference signal. You don't have to invent who you're becoming. You have to tune to it. Tuning is not done through willpower alone. It's done through repetition of small, precise acts that match the emotional signature of the life you claim to want. Not grand gestures, but consistent micro-alignments. Choosing honesty when the script demands performance. Letting a moment of genuine appreciation land instead of deflecting it. Resting when the old contract screams that rest is dangerous. Each time you do this, you're sending a message to the field. I am willing to host the version of me who doesn't need this old contract to feel safe. Over time, those messages accumulate as surely as your old patterns did. Except now, the accumulation is pushing in a different direction toward a reality where you are not constantly negotiating against your own existence. Of course, it feels unstable. Of course, it feels like walking on new ground that might not hold. That's what thresholds feel like, the old ground crumbling behind you, the new ground still forming under your feet. And the terrifying realization that you are not just a traveler in this process. You are a co-architect. You are building the bridge as you cross it, and the quantum field is not neutral to this. Once you begin moving with even a fraction of coherence, you'll start noticing odd synchronicities, conversations that arrive at perfect moments. Resources that appear exactly when you commit to a new path. Symbolic echoes that feel like the universe underlining a sentence you just whispered inside. These are not proof that everything will be easy. They are proof that the field is responsive, and responsiveness is all you need at this stage. Because if reality responds even slightly, you are no longer trapped in a fixed timeline. You are in dialogue. You can refine. You can adjust. You can learn the language of this new band of existence where your consciousness is no longer a passive recipient, but an active participant in how matter, meaning, and days arrange themselves around you. There's a question forming underneath all your other questions. What do I actually do with myself now? You understand the concepts. You feel the threshold, you've seen the patterns, but your life is built from hours and days, not just realizations. If nothing in your calendar, your conversations, your habits changes, this entire initiation collapses into an interesting experience instead of a new timeline. So the field is asking you for something concrete, a different use of your attention, a different quality of presence in the ordinary. Start here with something deceptively simple your next waking morning. Before your hand reaches for your phone, you pause, not for aesthetics, but for architecture. In that pause, you're standing at a tiny quantum fork. One path you let external noise colonize your nervous system before your own awareness has even checked in. The other you meet yourself first. So you lie there, eyes still closed, and you run a brief scan. You notice the first thought trying to grab you. Maybe it's about money. Maybe it's about a person. Maybe it's about failure. You don't argue with it. You label it old script loading. Then you ask a different question than usual. What is the emotional weather in my body right now before I attach a story? You feel into your chest, your throat, your stomach, your jaw. This is you switching instruments from mental narrative to somatic data. You might discover a tightness that has nothing to do with the content of the thought, a heaviness that's older than today's worries. That heaviness is not you being negative, it's residue. Unprocessed charge, the backlog of all the times you didn't have space to feel what you actually felt. Normally you'd outrun it. Today you witness it for 10 honest seconds. You breathe into that region not to fix it, but to acknowledge it. Think of it as checking in on a part of your system that has been working overtime without recognition. As you breathe, you send one silent message inward: I see that you're carrying this. You don't have to hold the entire sky alone anymore. That message might not change anything instantly, but it changes something fundamental who is in the room. Because now your fear, your tension, your dread are not the only presence inside you. There is also an observer who does not collapse around them, a witness that can feel pain without becoming identical to it. That witness is the same intelligence that interacts with the quantum field. It's the part of you the field recognizes as online. Later, as you move through your day, this witness becomes your primary tool. You're about to send the usual apologetic text. You're about to over-explain. You're about to say yes when your whole body wants to say no. You catch it half a second earlier than you did last month. That half second is gold. In that moment, you ask 3 questions. 1. What am I afraid will happen if I don't obey this old script? 2. Whose voice does this fear sound like originally? 3. Is that voice qualified to define reality for who I am now? You don't need perfect answers, you just need contact. Maybe you realize the fear sounds like a parent, a teacher, a first love, a community that only valued you when you performed. Maybe you feel how small your body becomes when that voice speaks, how your shoulders curve, how your breath shortens. That's your cue. You are not in the present moment anymore. You are time traveling into an old version of yourself and letting it pilot your current life. So you do something radical in its smallness. You straighten your spine a few millimeters. You slow your exhale by 2 counts. You let your next sentence be 1 degree more honest than usual. Not a revolution, a deviation. From a classical perspective, this seems insignificant. From a quantum perspective, tiny deviations at thresholds change entire trajectories. A fraction of a degree at the start becomes a completely different destination over distance. You are not trying to feel powerful. You are practicing being accurately calibrated. Power will come later as a side effect of coherence. For now, accuracy is enough, noticing when you're fused with the past and gently switching back into the present observer who can choose. This is the discipline of your new life. To catch yourself in the act of self-erasure and pause even when every cell is screaming that pausing is dangerous. To let the pause be long enough for a different future to have a chance to speak. That different future often arrives as a very quiet impulse. Say less. Ask the question you're afraid to ask. Don't chase this time. Close the screen and go outside. These impulses are small, but they carry a different emotional signature than your fear. They feel cleaner, less frantic, less entangled with proving your worth. When you follow them, you're not chasing a fantasy. You're aligning with a signal that already knows where it's leading you, even if you don't. From the outside, your life may look similar for a while. Same job, same relationships, same address. But underneath, the measurement apparatus has changed. The contracts are being questioned. The guardian is being re-educated. And the quantum field is watching closely to see if this threshold was a momentary curiosity or the beginning of an irreversible rewrite. You're starting to suspect that the real risk was never changing. The real risk was spending your entire life orbiting the same emotional coordinates, calling it stability, while your deeper intelligence quietly withered. Now that you've crossed this threshold, you're realizing something unnerving. Staying the same is no longer neutral. It's actively hostile, agile to who you're becoming. Your system knows this before your mind does. That's why the old comforts don't land the same. The shows you used to binge feel hollow 3 episodes in. The scrolling that once numbed you now leaves a metallic aftertaste in your chest. The conversations built on complaining gossip or performance leave you feeling like you've stepped out of your own skin. You're not too sensitive. You're accurately detecting misalignment. Your consciousness is recalibrating to a finer resolution. You're starting to notice the micro cost of each choice. The slight dimming you feel after laughing at a joke that cuts someone down. The static that lingers when you pretend to be impressed by something that doesn't move you. The heaviness that sits in your body after saying yes while your whole inner world was a no. These are not moral failures, they're data points. Every time you override your own resonance, the field registers it as noise interference in the signal you're trying to strengthen. It's like tuning an instrument and then deliberately knocking it out of tune to keep other people comfortable with the old song. That dissonance accumulates as anxiety, numbness, or a sense of unreality. You felt that unreality for years. Those moments where you watch yourself from the outside, performing the role, saying the line, laughing on cue, while a quiet voice inside whispers, "I don't actually live here. This is not my real life." You've called it depression, burnout, spiritual crisis. At this threshold, it has a clearer name: dissonant embodiment. Your body is in one timeline. Your consciousness is pressing against another. This is where the quantum split becomes more visible, not as dramatic apocalyptic imagery, but as subtle divergence. 2 versions of you beginning to separate. One continues the familiar trajectory: manageable suffering, predictable cycles, occasional highs followed by the same lows. The other steps into a landscape that doesn't yet have roads or guarantees, only a persistent inner pull and scattered waypoints of synchronicity. You cannot walk both paths. You can delay the choice. You can oscillate between brief bursts of courage and long retreats into old contracts. You can try to negotiate a compromise where you change just enough to relieve the pressure, but not enough to unsettle anyone around you. But the field doesn't bend to half choices, not at this level. Indecision is also a decision. It keeps you in the metastable, middle burning energy, but going nowhere. So life will begin to respond. Some connections will grow strangely quiet. People who resonated with your smaller self will sense the shift, even if they can't name it. They may accuse you of changing, pulling away, becoming different. You are. Not because you're superior, but because you're no longer willing to sacrifice your coherence to maintain dynamics built on your self-erasure. Some structures will wobble. Opportunities you thought you needed may fall through at the last second. Plans that once seemed solid will dissolve. On the surface, this looks like loss, failure, bad timing. Underneath, it's the field running a brutal clarity test. Are you crossing this threshold only if everything stays comfortable, or are you crossing it because you refuse to go back even if the bridge shakes? This is where many people retreat. They interpret the wobble as a sign that the universe is against me rather than as a stress test of their alignment. They re-sign the old contracts, double down on the familiar storyline, and call their surrender being realistic. You are being invited somewhere else. You're being asked to hold a different interpretation that what is falling away is not your future but your camouflage. The jobs, roles, and relationships that only loved the version of you willing to stay below threshold will not survive the broadcast of your truer signal. They will crack under it. That cracking will hurt, but it will also reveal what can actually meet you. This is not an invitation to self-sabotage. It's an invitation to stop self-abandoning. There's a difference. Self-sabotage is torching your life out of panic or despair, ending things impulsively, making chaos to feel something. That's the old architecture in meltdown. Self-abandonment is quieter, it's staying where your soul is dying because leaving would make other people uncomfortable. The path you're on now asks for a third option, self-alignment. Self-alignment sometimes looks like staying, but on different terms. Speaking more honestly, setting new boundaries, refusing old roles. Sometimes it looks like leaving, but with clarity and responsibility rather than dramatics. Sometimes it looks like not knowing yet, and letting that not knowing exist without rushing to numb it. In all cases, the question is the same. Am I moving toward or away from coherence? You won't always get it right. You're going to make messy choices, misread signals, overcorrect, undercorrect. That's expected. Thresholds are not passed with perfect choreography. They're crossed by a series of imperfect, sincere steps in the direction of truth. The field is not evaluating you on flawless execution. It's reading your vector. Are you on average choosing slightly more honesty than last year? Slightly more self-respect, slightly less self-betrayal? Are you willing, when confronted with your own patterns, to pause and say, yes, that's me, and I am willing to move differently now? If the answer is yes, even shakily, even in whispers, then the trajectory has already changed. The life that matches your old contracts is now on a slow drift away from you. The life that matches your new signal is on a slow approach. They may overlap for a while, like two realities phasing through each other. But eventually one will become background memory, and the other will become the only atmosphere you can breathe. You can already feel which atmosphere your body prefers. Even if your mind is still bargaining, your cells are not confused. They know the difference between the heaviness of self-betrayal and the strange, quiet rightness of alignment. They register it as subtle shifts in electricity, how your skin feels in certain rooms, how your breath moves around certain people, how your spine responds when you tell the truth versus when you perform. Your DNA is not a static script, it's an adaptive archive. Every time you choose coherence over conditioning, you're not just changing mindset, you're altering how that archive expresses itself. Epigenetics in scientific language. Remembrance in mystical language. Dormant codes switching on because the environment, internal and external, finally supports their emergence. This is why the field takes your small choices so seriously. From its vantage point, you are not just one person trying to feel better. You are a node in a vast human network, a lattice of consciousness running through cities, families, timelines. When one node upgrades its pattern, the signals it sends through that lattice change. People around you may not understand why, but they feel it. Conversations bend, dynamics shift. Some systems reject the new signal. Others quietly reorganize around it. This is how reality reorganizes without announcements. You've seen the opposite before. One person trapped in fear can tilt an entire room into anxiety. Everyone starts talking quieter, shrinking, avoiding certain topics. That's a field effect. Now imagine the same principle but in reverse. One person anchored in coherence can stabilize a chaotic atmosphere just by existing inside it without collapsing. You are being trained to become that kind of presence. Not a savior, not an idol, a reference point. A human whose nervous system is no longer entirely hijacked by old contracts, which means you can stay standing emotionally, energetically in situations that used to knock you out of yourself. You can feel other people's storms without confusing them for your own weather. You can love without dissolving into whoever you're loving. This is advanced work. That's why you were brought to this threshold at night. Night is when the collective noise dims just enough for the deeper transmissions to get through. When the identities you wear in daylight loosen their grip. When the quiet questions surface. Who am I when I'm not performing for anyone? Who would I be if I stopped rehearsing my own disappearance? You're touching those questions now, and you might notice something else, a faint echo of calling that doesn't fit neatly into personal goals. It's not just about getting your life together, it's about an almost embarrassing sense that your existence matters to something larger. That there is a role, a function, an assignment. Only your particular configuration of scars and strengths can fulfill. The old architecture laughs at this. It calls it delusion, ego fantasy. But feel the difference in your body when you consider two statements: I'm insignificant. Nothing I do changes anything. Versus my alignment might be more consequential than I can currently comprehend. The first feels familiar, even safe. It justifies staying small. The second feels dangerous but alive. It pulls you upright from the inside. That inner straightening is not arrogance. It's structural integrity. When you stand like that, not as a performance but as a natural posture, the field can route different kinds of assignments through you. Conversations that wake people up instead of just entertaining them. Work that actually uses your deeper intelligence instead of just renting your time. Encounters that feel prearranged by something beyond coincidence. Does this mean you will suddenly know your purpose in one cinematic revelation? No. That's the old mind demanding certainty again. Purpose at this level is less like a job description and more like a frequency band. You inhabit it by degree through thousands of micro-choices that all orbit the same axis. I will no longer distort myself to maintain realities that require my absence. From there, the shape of your life becomes a moving answer. Specifics will unfold through interaction. The project you feel irrationally drawn to, the person you feel strangely safe with, the idea that keeps returning. No matter how often you dismiss it, each one is a negotiation with the field. Are you serious about this new signal, or was tonight just a beautiful thought? You prove you're serious not by shouting your evolution from the rooftops, but by the way you handle the next cycle of compression. Because it will come. Thresholds are not straight lines upward, they are spirals. You will revisit old feelings, old patterns, old rooms, but as a different variant of yourself. The test is not whether the pattern appears, but whether you interpret its reappearance as proof that nothing has changed, or as an invitation to respond from the new architecture. When the familiar pain knocks again, and it will, your job is not to be fearless. Your job is to remain the observer who crossed the line tonight and ask, even with shaking hands, how would the version of me breathing this new atmosphere move here even by 1 degree, then do that. Clumsily, imperfectly, on purpose. The field is watching that vector, not your elegance. If you could see yourself from outside the timeline, you'd understand why tonight was inevitable. Not guaranteed. Nothing at this level is guaranteed, but highly probable once your internal variables lined up. Enough self-observation, enough suffering that no longer produced growth, only repetition. Enough small acts of honesty that signaled to the field this one is willing to pay attention. From that vantage point, your life looks less like a random sequence of events and more like a controlled experiment run by something deeply invested in your awakening. You've been placed in specific environments to expose particular contracts. You've been drawn to certain people to mirror your architecture. You've been denied certain outcomes not because you were unworthy, but because achieving them from your old configuration would have locked you into a reality that could never hold the fullness of who you are. Denial has been one of your most precise teachers. You begged for doors that would have become cages. You mourned relationships that would have required you to amputate your emerging self. You resented delays that were actually buffers, buying time for your nervous system to upgrade before carrying responsibilities that would crush the older version of you. You called it abandonment. The field called it calibration. This doesn't erase the pain, but it repurposes it. At this threshold, you're allowed to hold both truths at once. That hurt me, and that hurt also revealed who I can no longer be. The first honors your humanity, the second honors your trajectory. From a quantum perspective, every unresolved wound is like a localized distortion in your field, a region where the wave function of your potential collapses prematurely into the same old outcome. You approach intimacy, money, visibility, creativity, and at the exact radius where your nervous system remembers past harm, the distortion kicks in, you flinch, you sabotage, you disappear. Tonight's initiation is not about pretending those distortions don't exist. It's about mapping them so clearly that they stop operating as invisible fate. You are becoming a cartographer of your own consciousness. You'll start to recognize that each major area of your life has a particular critical radius, a point beyond which your system hasn't allowed you to go without triggering alarms. A certain depth of love, a certain level of abundance, a certain degree of creative exposure. Every time you approach that radius, your guardian pulls the fire alarm and floods you with anxiety or numbness. Previously, you interpreted the alarm as a command. Turn back. This is dangerous. Now you're going to treat it like data. I've reached the edge of my old world. Edges are where new physics applies. Outside the critical radius, your usual assumptions are not reliable guides. The stories your mind tells about what always happens haven't actually been tested there because you've never stayed long enough to gather data. You've touched the edge, panicked, retreated, and declared, "See, I knew it wouldn't work." At this threshold, that pattern is no longer acceptable. You're going to practice staying, not in situations that harm you. There is no awakening in tolerating abuse, but in situations that stretch you in ways your old identity finds unbearable, genuine kindness, real opportunity, clean power, authentic visibility. When something good enters your field and your first instinct is to minimize, deflect, or preemptively destroy it, that's your cue. The alarm is sounding because you've crossed into uncharted probabilistic space. Your job is not to silence the alarm, but to breathe while it screams and let your body discover that it can survive this level of goodness without catastrophe. This is nervous system reprogramming at the deepest level. This is wave function extension. Every time you stay present with an upgraded experience, love, without performing rest, without guilt expression, without apology, you push your critical radius outward. You prove to your architecture we can exist here. We did not die. The pattern must update. The field responds accordingly. Options that were previously impossible begin to show up as coincidences. People who reflect your new frequency appear with unnerving precision. Old dynamics feel like foreign languages. You're not manifesting from fantasy. You're occupying a band of reality that was always available but inaccessible to your previous configuration. Of course, there will be backlash, not from some external punishing force, but from inertia. Systems inner and outer resist change. Your own psyche will stage small coups trying to drag you back into recognizable suffering. You'll be tempted to create unnecessary drama just to feel at home in the chaos you understand. This is where your training as an observer becomes non-negotiable. When you catch yourself reaching for chaos, you pause and name it. I am trying to re-enter an atmosphere my body is addicted to, but my soul has outgrown. Then you don't shame yourself. You don't congratulate yourself either. You simply stand there between the old gravity and the new, and let the craving pass like weather. That standing is not passive. It is an act of profound creation. Because in those moments you are choosing which universe to feed, the one built from your oldest stories or the one being written by the you who crossed this hidden quantum threshold tonight. And eventually one of those universes will lose its claim on your future. There is a line you will cross one day without fanfare and only realize it later. A conversation will end and you won't abandon yourself. A door will close and you won't translate it as proof that you are unchosen. A moment of visibility will arrive and you won't rush to make yourself smaller. And afterward, in the quiet, you'll feel it. Something irreversible just happened. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just a clean quiet no more that doesn't ask for permission and doesn't announce itself to anyone. A version of you that would have folded simply isn't in the room anymore. It didn't ascend in light or vanish in smoke. It just stopped being the one in charge. This is how thresholds complete themselves, not in explosions, but in absences. The absence of compulsive apology, the absence of hunger for approval from those who cannot perceive you, the absence of reflexive self-blame when reality moves in ways you don't understand. In the space where those reflexes used to be, something else appears. Not a performance of confidence, but a grounded, almost eerie stillness. You begin to sense the structure beneath the swirl of circumstances, the quiet, precise intelligence that has been arranging your encounters with yourself for years. You call it God. You call it the quantum field. You call it destiny, higher self, the loom. It doesn't mind the name, it responds to the posture. And your posture is different now. You walk into rooms less as a question and more as a presence. You speak not to manage how others see you, but to align the atmosphere with what is actually true. You listen not to scan for threat, but to discern where your energy is being invited and where it is being extracted. You still feel fear, you still feel grief, you still feel the phantom pull of old contracts, but you don't mistake them for instruction anymore. You recognize them as echoes from a universe losing its claim on your nervous system. You let them speak without giving them the last word. You place them gently in the archive of what used to run me and return to the you that stands at the center of this new field, observant, imperfect, but unwilling to go back. This is the real crossing. Not the night you felt a surge of insight, but the mornings after, when you honored it in the smallest, most boring choices, the boundary you held, the rest you took. The message you didn't send, the apology you didn't owe. The creative impulse you finally gave a body and time. From the outside, it looks like an ordinary life. From the inside, it feels like sovereignty. And the loom responds. Threads you could never have planned begin to intersect people whose nervous systems feel like homework that doesn't require you to fracture moments of guidance so precise they leave you wordless. You start to witness with increasing clarity that you are not moving through a dead universe. You are in conversation with a living one. So here at the end of this transmission, the invitation is simple and absolute. Do not worship the moment you cross this hidden quantum threshold. Live as the one who did. When you close your eyes tonight, let one sentence seal itself into your system, not as affirmation, but as recognition. I am no longer available for realities that require me to abandon myself to belong. Say it once out loud. Feel how your body reacts. Let the tremor be part of the initiation. Then sleep not as a refugee of your own past, but as an emerging citizen of a new inner world. One whose laws are written by coherence, whose currency is attention, whose prophecy is not distant doom, but the quiet certainty that your consciousness has already stepped into a future that remembers you whole. This threshold was hidden in time. Tonight you found it. From here, every choice is a line you draw in the loom of your reality. Draw it on purpose.